is one built tank. Then there is another side. We have the raw materials or unprinted powder, or the initial tank in which the raw material will be filled. So what happens in this process is you have a platform which will be on the top, and you will have a roller and a powder mechanism that will uh, drop a thin layer of raw material onto this build platform. And you have a print head here. Instead of dropping a polymer, it will drop a polymer binder solution. So this binder solution, what it does is it binds and fuses these material together. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add certain binder solution in places where I want the polymer to fuse together. And in the remaining places where I don't want, I'm going to leave it as it is. So this process is going to be repeated again and again. In fact, once the binder is laid onto this platform, there will be a heated roller which will move along the surface and bind the particles together. So whichever place I want to bind, that gets binded, and the rest will not get binded and will still remain in powder form. And this platform will move down, and the next layer is layered onto this, and then the process is repeated. And once the entire part is done, you will have the part coming out, and then you can do the post processing. The main advantage in binder jetting is you can go for printing metal. So binder jetting is specifically used for printing polymers as well as metal parts, metals and alloys. And in fact, here, if you see in this image, these are made up of bronze and uh, I think stainless steel, yeah, stainless steel, and you have certain post processing techniques which will help you strengthen and strengthen this actual parts. So you have to put this part into a chamber. This chamber will, it's like a oven, heated oven, in which you have to place these parts, and the post processing takes place. This is how the binder jetting technique works. Next, in this slide, you can see the commercially available binder jetting materials which are present, such as the HP, HP metal, which prints in stainless steel, and we also have this Exxon metal, which prints stainless steel as well as tungsten. And in fact, the Voxjet prints in sand, plastic, and ceramic specifically. And in fact, if you see, when you go for stainless steel, your resolution ranges between 30 to 200 microns. Whereas if you go for sand, plastic, or ceramic, your resolution ranges from 150 to 300 microns. So why this variation is there? Why can't all the material be in the same form? Is that if you go for metal, the metal powder will not bind together when you are having the size larger. That is, your powder particles size, if it's larger, it will not bind together. It is easier to bind finer and smaller particles when compared to binding a thicker and larger particle size of materials. That is where your plastics and ceramics, even if they are a bit larger and even if you're having a larger layer thickness, the part will still be able to bind. Whereas if you go for metal, it is a bit difficult. That is why you have to go with finer, as well as you need a very good finish. You need a very good surface finish. And ultimately, that is what is going to help you decide on which type of technique or methodology you want to use this. What do you say? Which methodology you want to produce your parts? Because if I just want, say, just quick prototypes, then I can go with FDM. If I want just really high finish, but I don't want it to be really costly, then I can go with uh, multi-jetting or polymer jetting. And if I want metal parts specifically, then I have to go with binder jetting. So this is where the type of methodology that I use also will come into picture. Also, the next main advantage, like I have mentioned here, and the limitations of this thing is it does not include a like I said, in this process, there is a small heated roller and there will be a uh, binder material that is being dropped as well as a heated roller that will bind this particle together. Here, the energy that is being used for that heating process is very less because most of your energy is consumed only in the post-processing phase, because your main functionality of this uh, or the main purpose of this technique is you want to bind the particles and together to make the basic green part. It's called a green part, basic part that you want to further post process it and then get the actual part. That is where your binder jetting technique works. And in fact, when you compare to other types of techniques, your cost is quite less comparing to other techniques. For example, you have selective laser sintering and direct metal deposition methods that are available, which are really costly, and it includes a lot of manpower as well as energy in obtaining a metal components. And one certain limitations of these parts are you can expect these parts to be a little porous. And post processing also is a bit difficult to do it because you have to be very careful that your part doesn't break off when you are trying to remove the unbinded powder. And you have to use a very small thin mesh kind of brush which would help you to remove the binder or the other unbinded particles from these intricate designs, because there are certain parts which are very intricate. If you see these gears and there are holes where you have to remove the material out, you have to be very careful in removing that without even disturbing the actual part, or because they're going to be a bit brittle and fragile. So only after post processing these become the actual solid components where you're going to use it for a end use. And now coming to this VAT polymerization. So since my focus would be more on VAT polymerization and the techniques that has fascinated me in working with this system, in fact, I have also developed a VAT polymerization machine at a very low cost in my previous work tenure. So I will explain you how exactly this what is VAT polymerization and how this VAT polymerization or photopolymerization technique works. VAT polymerization, the first and foremost method. This is in fact the first method of 3D printing that was introduced almost in the 18th centuries itself. This technique was available. In fact, 3D Systems is one such company which holds the patents for this technology, and they were the first ones to pioneer these uh, methods of 3D printing. So, what is the function and how does it work? How does this VAT polymerization work? So, when you come to VAT polymerization, you have two techniques. One is called stereolithography, another one is called digital light processing. So, first one is stereolithography. So stereolithographic process is a process where you selectively cure a photopolymer layer by layer. So what happens here is, if you see in this videos, so if you see in these videos, you can see there is a small tank. In this tank, there will be a certain photopolymer present. And you have a build platform that dips into this tank. It's a perforated build platform that dips into that tank. So it will dip enough so that a thin layer of photopolymer resin is present on this tank, on this build platform. Then you have a small blade that spreads and distributes this photopolymer uniformly. And then you have a laser, you have a pointed laser that traces the two-dimensional cross-sectional area of the part that we want to print. So this laser will selectively cure at on this build platform layer by layer fashion. So once one layer is finished, you have the platform moving down. So it will move one layer down, and then you have a small blade that spreads a fresh amount of photopolymer onto this part, and the laser again traces the path layer by layer fashion to obtain this 3D part. So once this entire part is done, you can remove it and then you can go for post processing. So how this laser works? What is the process? Here, this laser system will actually be directed onto two different mirrors. So one mirror, if you see in this video, one mirror will help it in tracing in X direction. The other mirror will help it to trace in Y direction. So in the general process of 3D printing or any 3D printing methods, the first thing is for you to get that CAD model. You have to slice it, and then you have to send that sliced part to the machine, and the machine will do the printing layer by layer. Here, what will happen is once the every cross section is sliced, each cross section is traced by this laser. So as the polymer is traced by the laser, the polymer gets cured and solidifies. So that is why this is called a photopolymer. And in fact, this layer will be of certain, this laser will be of certain wavelength in which this particular photopolymer will solidify. So once you expose it to that wavelength, this polymer cures and it happens in layer by layer fashion, and then you get the final output of the part. Now, they have in the recent trends, we have two types of obtaining or printing in stereolithography. That is, one is a top-down printing, another one is bottom-up printing. In top-down printing, so this is the first traditional method in which the selective layer, the stereolithographic process was developed. So like I said, the 3D system, right? So they have developed this top-down approach where you have a build tank and you have this platform which goes and dips into this tank, and layer by layer, this laser will scan that cross-sectional area and then get the actual part. This is where your top-down approach comes. And another method is your bottom-up printing or the bottom-up approach. In the bottom-up approach, you will have a small tank in which this photopolymer liquid is present. And here, the catch is your bottom of this tank will be transparent. So what happens is here, a small laser traces not from the top, but rather it traces from the bottom, because you will have a transparent bottom in this tank, and this laser will scan the cross-sectional area from the bottom. So what happens is you have a platform that dips into this tank, and it will create enough gap, it will just leave enough gap for one small layer to be present in between this transparent bottom and the build platform, such that the moment that laser traces the part, the actual part gets stuck to the build platform inverted. So here, the platform is here and your part is printed on top of it. Whereas here, the platform goes completely to the bottom, and your part, the orange portion where I have highlighted here, is the part where the actual part is printed. So here, the part gets stuck to the bottom, and that happens layer by layer fashion. And again, the two-dimensional scanning happens due from by this laser, which helps it in solidifying that uh, photopolymer. And now you might think, like, what is this? What is the difference, and why should I go with top-down printing or bottom-up printing? Now, if you've seen in this top-down printing, you have this tank, and this tank is completely filled with the polymer resin. And in fact, this laser will cure only the topmost surface. It will not cure the entire build. This laser will not penetrate through this resin. What will happen is only the topmost layer will be cured. So you have a constraint of keeping this entire tank completely filled up to the brim. And you also have to compensate for this entire platform being dipped, because if you're trying to dip something or anything into liquid, that liquid is going to rise up. It's not going to stay as it is. It is going to rise up. So to compensate that also, you have to maintain at the brim. You have to maintain the polymer at the brim. And in fact, it becomes very difficult to always have the polymer present up to the brim. And a lot of raw material is constantly needed. Whereas if you go for this bottom-up approach, you just have to fill enough resin that is required to print one or two objects, or based on how much ever objects that you desire. And you don't have to keep this tank always full, because what happens here is the platform is going almost until the bottom. So it is going to give only a gap of one layer, and your printing happens only at the bottom of the tank. It doesn't happen at the top. So it is happening at the bottom. So since it's happening at the bottom, after every layer, even if the quantity of that polymer reduces, the first bottom layer will always have that polymer until it empties. It will always have that polymer there. So you don't have to keep the entire tank full, and you can save a lot of raw material when you go with bottom up approach. In fact, the space required to make such machine is also very less, because you have desktop version of SLA available, which are portable and which can print fine detail and high quality prints. Whereas if you see in top-down approach, is mostly used in industrial machines. I can show you some of the industrial machines. So here I have also mentioned what are the differences. Like I said, if you go with bottom up, your cost and the build size. So if you go for top down, you will go only with industrial machines, which are very large, and you have a much more faster build times, because if you see in this part, you have to make sure that every layer, once it's cured, it should detach from the bottom of the tank, because it's going to create some suction. It's going to be sticky. It's going to be sticky either to the build platform or the bottom surface. So you have to make sure that it doesn't stick to the bottom surface and sticks to the build platform, because you have this tendency of the part to stick to the bottom of the surface. To avoid that, you're going to use non-sticky transparent layer here. There's something called FEP, which we have used specifically for non-sticky layer, non-sticky transparent layer. But different manufacturers have different types of techniques to use, because there's one company called Carbon 3D which uses some patented technology called CLIP, continuous liquid I forgot its full form. It's called CLIP technology. I'll get back to you on that. Continuous liquid interface photopolymerization. Yeah, continuous liquid interface photopolymerization. Uh, so they have their own methods of having this non-sticky layer, and in fact, they have something called oxygen permeable layer, which helps them to what do you say? Provide oxygen in this portion, so that the curing process happens really fast. In fact, if you see, their system has the highest print time. And like I said, the popular machines available right now in desktop, that is the bottom up approach, are Formlabs and Envision Tech, which go with bottom up approach. Whereas if you go see in top down, you have the 3D systems, who are the first inventors of this. Not 3D systems were not the first inventors, rather this person called Chuck Hulse, who started this company called 3D Systems. You can say that. So Chuck Hulse holds the patents for stereolithography process, and he is the founder of 3D Systems. And you also have Prodways. Prodways is one such special company who have mastered this top-down approach of SLA. And in fact, if you see, the build volumes of top-down approach are much larger when compared to the build volumes of a bottom-up SLA. And the layer heights for each of this range between 25 to 100 microns and 150 microns. Both of it can range between that range. Since it's a liquid polymer, you cannot go beyond 150, because your laser or your UV light will not pass through that entire polymer, because certain polymers are transparent and certain polymers are thick and viscous. So it is very difficult to penetrate UV radiation into that polymer. Only since to keep that at the minimum range, we have to try to keep the layer height less. And also you need a better print quality, right? So to have a better print quality, you have to go with much finer and thinner layer heights, so that you'll be able to get a very smooth surface finish. And the next technique that I would like to talk is on digital light processing. So this is the second type of vat polymerization technique, where you have a resin vat. This is also following this, what do you say, bottom up approach, where you have the build platform going into the tank and it will lift up. And again, here your part is again printed inverse. So your part gets stuck to the bottom of the plate and it is printed inverse. You can see in this video as well. So your part gets printed inverse and you have the resin tank and you have something below. You have a projection system below which helps in this photopolymerization. What is the system is what I'm going to explain here. You have something called digital light processing system. So there is this company called Texas Instrument who are the inventors, and they are the only manufacturers of this digital micro mirror device, DMD. What I have mentioned here is digital micro mirror devices. So I'll get into the details of how that thing works. So to understand this, what exactly happens is, here you have, if you see in SLA, you have a laser tracing every layer line by line. But here, an entire surface, entire cross-sectional area is photo cured at a single go. So you have a entire layer being projected from the bottom to the bottom of this tank, and entire cross-sectional area cures. So that is what speeds the process, and that is how digital light processing is different from that conventional stereolithic process. So you have an LED or the UV LED, which is directed onto this DMD chip. The DMD chip will create the image, the 2D cross-sectional image that will help it to photo cure. That is, your bottom of that tank will be illuminated with this cross-sectional image, and then the process is repeated. Here, what you see is after every layer, once that curing process happen, usually each layer take up to 6 to 10 seconds per layer for photo curing. Again, this again depends on the power of your LED, because if you're having a higher wattage of UV LED, the time taken would be much less and the penetration will be higher. So that will vary. But typically in the ones which are available in the market, they take about 6 to 10 seconds on an average per layer. Here, after every layer, the platform lifts because you want that part to detach from the bottom of this tank and then lift. So here, what mechanism they have used is, they have used a sliding mechanism. You have this platform or your built tank which slides. This sliding mechanism helps it to reduce that suction pressure created between the part and the bottom of the resin tank. And in fact, the wavelength of this light will be somewhere around 300 to 420 nanometers. So most of the photopolymers cure in the UV range. And when you go with the material, you have various composites available. In fact, whatever is available for SLA process is also available here in digital light processing as well. And the application is very wide and vast, uh, be it series production, and specifically, I have seen in India they're using for dental and jewelry applications. Still, the adaptation has been very slow to this new techniques, but I feel it has a very good research opportunities for this. You have a lot of research opportunity available in this technique, and also a vast people will definitely adopt to such technologies. Just that you need to give that awareness. So now let me get into details about what is this DMD chip. How does this work? So these are the industry DLP and SLA printers. In fact, this protofab is a moving DLP type. So they have a DLP system that is moving in X and Z direction. And ProMaker is a SLA machine, and Envision Tech is again a DLP based machine. So I will show you how exactly this DMD, what is this DMD and how exactly this DMD works. So DMD is nothing but digital micro mirror devices. So as I said, these are developed by Texas Instruments, and they are in the entire world, they are the only ones who manufacture this DMD chip. And in fact, they have grown to this range because of this invention. So what this DMD chip is when you see, this will be a small rectangular chip of made up of aluminum, which is having small micro mirrors. So it's called micro mirrors. So this is the zoomed version of it, where you will have small micro mirrors made up of aluminum, which are highly reflective. So what happens here is, now you will have a light, that is our UV light or halogen lamp or any lamp or light, which is being projected onto this DMD chip. So what happens is, you have two options. So this each mirror is electronically controlled, and it can either rotate by plus 12 degrees or minus 12 degrees. So if it rotates onto plus 12 degrees, the light which gets hit onto this mirror gets reflected towards the projection system. Let me take the pen to explain you much better. So what happens, suppose if I have a light source here, and I have light coming from light source and falling onto this mirror. So the light source hits the mirror, and it either reflects plus 12 degrees or the other side, minus 12 degrees. So the moment it reflects on plus 12 degrees, the light reflects, and you will have the projector where the image is being displayed, and the other side you will have something called a light absorber, or an empty space, you can say, where if your light hits onto this and reflects on that side, then it will get absorbed or it's not going to display. So this is the place where our display is going to be, and these micro mirror devices is going to reflect all the lights selectively. So if you see, if I have to say I want to project a circle, I want to project a circle on this place, what happens, only certain micro mirrors which come into that circle will reflect this light onto this screen, the actual screen. Whereas the all other mirrors, if you see, only these which are coming in contact with this line are going to reflect it towards the projection system. The remaining of that is going to reflect the light into the absorbing portion. So this is how your digital micro mirror devices work. So what happens, how are we using this is, uh, I think you have seen projectors, right? You have this office projectors. This is what is present inside that projectors also. You will have this lamp, which is projecting light onto this mirrors, DMD chip, and that DMD chip will selectively either reflect or towards the projection or away from the projection. And also, if you see in the conventional projector, you will have a color wheel. So before the light before the light comes onto the projection, there will be a color wheel. Based on RGB values, it will give a certain color. So if you want red, blue, green, based on that, it will give you the color. So it is, this DMD chip is equivalent to pixels. So if you see in your screen, you have that pixels, right? How many pixels per inch you have? That is being defined by the amount of mirror present in this DMD chip. So every micro mirror becomes a pixel. So that will help you in determining what is the resolution of your image. So that is how your projection system works. The same way it happens in 3D printing also. You're projecting an entire image onto the bottom of the tank. So this is how this particular system helps in creating a two-dimensional projection. Now, when it comes to DMD, you can clearly see that if I am printing one object or if I am printing 5 objects parallelly, it's going to take the same amount of time. Why? Because every layer is cured at a single stretch. So even if I have, say, if I on my build platform, I'm having say one part, or if I having 10 different parts or 5 different parts in the same place, the time taken for all those parts is going to be the same, because the entire cross-sectional area, like I said, is going to be cured at a single stretch. So if I'm printing a pen, which approximately takes me somewhere around say 10 hours to print, even if I'm printing one prototype, or even if I'm printing 5 in a series, it's going to take 10 hours, because entire layer is being projected at a time. Now, coming to another technique which I have personally worked on is the liquid crystal display technique. Now, if you see in projector system, only if you place a projector at a certain distance, this projector system will work, because you need to keep. I'll take this as an example. Say you will have a projector and you will have a certain screen on which you will have to project that light on. Only at a certain distance only you will be able to focus that image onto that platform. But this will lead to a larger area and a larger machine size. So to overcome this challenge, I have worked on one particular technique of liquid crystal display, where your liquid crystal display, what happens is your LCD will also display two-dimensional images. Like how projector displays two-dimensional image, your LCD also projects two-dimensional image. So instead of projecting this two-dimensional image onto uh, the bottom of the tank with the help of DLP, I'm going to project that same image using a liquid crystal display. So there are certain specific type of these LCDs are not similar. I mean, they're quite similar to the present screens or laptop screens or your mobile screens, all which are made up of LCD, right? So they're very similar to this. But whereas if you see in your current LCD screens or your phone screens, they will not give you UV light. They are going to give only in visible light. But this particular LCD will specifically give you UV light. So because your photopolymer cures only in the UV range. In fact, you do have polymers which cure in visible range, but if you go with UV polymers, then you will have to have UV range. So how this LCD exactly works? So to understand how exactly this LCD works, let me show you this. So how this technique works is, just imagine, I think most of you would have seen this. It's called polarizers. You will have that small thin sheet which will have black and transparent strips of patterns on it, and you will have two of them. In fact, in some of the labs also we might have used this. I'm not sure of the specific thing, but I hope you would know what a polarizer is. So this polarizer, what it exactly does is, you have certain type of light, general light coming from some certain source. It can be a bulb, lamp, sunlight, be it anything. So what happens is, you have two types of polarizer. One is horizontal polarizer and one more is vertical polarizer. So the horizontal polarizer, what it does is, the light passes through that horizontal polarizer, and you will have light which are polarized of horizontal light. So only a certain type of things will pass. If you see, once the light passes through this polarizer, it will have a specific waveform, the horizontal waveform. Only that light should have passed through that. And you also have another polarizer which is called vertical polarizer. So vertical polarizer, where only vertical light will pass. So imagine you having light waves, only horizontal and vertical will go. So if you see horizontal and vertical, the light waves will pass through that polarizer only at a certain point. I'm sorry about this bad writing, but I hope you're able to understand. So only a certain wavelength of light will wave angle of light will pass through this horizontal polarizer. And if you place a vertical polarizer on the other side, the light will not pass. Why? Because once the light passes through horizontal polarizer, only horizontal waveforms will be present and will pass through that. That will not pass through the vertical polarizer. Why? Because you don't have vertical form of wavelight present. So what you need to do is you need to bend this light. So here, if you see, you have to bend this wave light such that it passes through this vertical polarizer. So if you place two polarizers, vertical and horizontal, no light will pass. But if you place two horizontal polarizers, all the lights will pass. So what this liquid crystal does is, the moment you apply certain voltage across that crystal, it bends the light by 90 degrees. So that is what this liquid crystal does. So the moment I have my horizontal polarized light passing through this polarizer and hit the pass through this liquid crystal will help me in bending the light by 90 degrees. So wherever I bend, it is called the permeable state, where the light bends and passes through and I have a light coming out of this. And wherever it is not, wherever I have not applied voltage, that place the light will not pass through because you have the vertical polarizer blocking it. So that will be the impermeable state. So this is how you can control the light passing through that pixel or not passing through that pixel. So like I said, LCDs are made up of very tiny dots of pixels. So you have a screen, like they tell, right? You have 2K screen or 4K resolution of screen. So they say that it is 4K resolution. Why they say is it defines the number of pixels per inch. So how many pixels are present in the entire screen is what they are trying to explain. So each pixel will be individually controlled with certain voltage so that the light either passes through or doesn't pass through that pixel. And if you see in the traditional screen, you will also have RGB color filters, which will again help you to combine the colors and give you multicolors. But whereas if you take in our 3D printing requirement, we don't need color. All we need is either the light passes through or the light doesn't pass through. That is all we need. So this is where the DLP process helps. The UV light will pass through the vertical polarizer or the vertical filter. It's also called as vertical filter, and it gets filtered, and then the crystal molecule will bend the light by 90 degree and pass through that horizontal filter. Only then the light will come out of it, and I can illuminate the pixels that I want to. So this bending of light in the liquid crystal helps me in either turning on or off the pixels. So this is how LCD works. So with this technique, I'm able to project an entire image. Now, even if you see in your phone screen or your, oh, what happened? Yeah, sorry. So even if you see in your phone screen or your laptop screen, any screens, you will have these pixels present. And each pixel will have this RGB filter, and beyond which the light passes through. Suppose if you are having a black screen, that time none of the light will pass through. If you have a complete white screen, that time you will have the light passing through. So that is how your LCD works. Next, how the photopolymer works. What are these photopolymers? So photopolymers are liquid materials which contains three major components. One is monomer, one is oligomer, and another one is photoinitiator. So what are these components? Monomer is the one which helps us making the actual material, actual part that we want to. We can combine multiple monomers to vary the property of the material that we want to. Then we have oligomers. Monomers and oligomers are the ones which combine to form a solid part. And then we have photoinitiators. Photoinitiators are the ones which initiate the process of polymerization. So you have liquid polymers which have monomers, which have photoinitiators, which have oligomers. Now to initiate from liquid state to solid state, I am going to project certain UV light. So the UV light will be of certain wavelength, and that will initiate the process of solidification. And in fact, our UV ranges from uh, wide wavelength, that is 276 or 200, also you can say beyond that also. Two, you also have until visible range, that is 850 nanometers, somewhere around red. So I think the visible range is somewhere around 450 and beyond, which is our visible range. So this range is where our LCD screen works, and below this is where our UV works. Below this is where our UV works. For every wavelength of light, we have different monomers and oligomers and the corresponding photoinitiators. And majorly, we work in the 405 or 400 to 405 nanometers. So here what happens, it is just below the visible range, because we cannot work with the highly UV wavelength range, because we don't have access to such UV lights. Also, it is harmful to us. So that is the reason in the current trend we are only working in the uh, close to visible range wavelength. So that is somewhere around 400 to 405 or 410 nanometers. And like I said, so we can have different monomers combined. We can, that is to change the property. Suppose if you want flexible material, or if you want tough material or castable material, all that will be the combination of these two, and you can combine different monomers to form different polymers chain that you want to. So this will help us determine the material or the part that we want to print in. And what is the typical process, and where is this being used in the current scenario? So the first major thing that I told you, it is used in medical and dental application. In fact, it is widely used in dental application to create crowns, bridges, aligners, and what else, for surgical guides. So various applications are present, and the process is quite simple. You have this be it SLA or be it DLP, once the photopolymerization or the printing happens, you have to remove the object and you have to clean it, because these resins are not skin friendly. These are harmful. Not very highly harmful, because there are certain resins which are also can be handled by hand, but most of them are a bit harmful. So first thing for you to do is to clean it. So you have to clean it with alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol is fine, and you have to clean it, and then you have to remove your supports, because since these parts are printed out of liquid, you also have to generate supports along with your part. So once the cleaning is done, you can do two things. Either you post cure it. Post curing is where the part completely solidifies and becomes hard and tough. It reaches our desired property of the material. Either you remove the support material and then do post curing, or do post curing and then remove the support material. So this is interchangeable. Why I'm telling this is because the moment you print it and you try to remove the support material, you may end up damaging the part. So to avoid the damaging of the actual part, you will do the post curing first, and then you will try to remove the support material by cutting off these support structures. Because at certain what do you say, certain tough to reach spots, it will be very difficult for me to remove the support. So it is better to remove what do you say, the support only after post curing. But in certain places, if you need a very good surface finish and it is easy for me to remove the support before, then I would rather prefer removing the support before and then doing post curing. Because once I do post curing and then come to support removal, there is going to be tiny bits of marks present on this part, which is which will create a rough surface. So to avoid that, you can remove the support first and then do post curing. And support removal is mostly preferred after post curing, and after that you can do post processing. You can do sanding, you can do painting, you can do priming. All that additional post processing can be done after removing the supports, and which is much more easier when compared to removing the support and then doing it later. And this specific application is where scanning is also coming into place. In fact, in dental industry, they have this intraoral scanners. So what happens here is you have a scanning system that helps you scan the entire contours of your internal mouth structure, and you can create a STL file. So STL file is nothing but our CAD file, which is used specifically for 3D printing. It's called a mesh type of file. So that is a file format used commonly for 3D printing. Nowadays, you also have something called .amf, which is the additive manufacturing file, which also stores certain parameters along with STL files. So what happens is you scan it, you will get a DMX file. That is what your scanning system will give. Then you can remove all the extra unwanted portions and just keep what portion you need. And from that file, you can generate the STL file and you can create whatever support or the additional features that you need to that same part. And then you can go for 3D printing. So there are three different softwares used for this. Like I said, the model builder is used for the scanning to create that model, and you have the dental system software which is used to convert it into a STL file, and you have 3Shape. In fact, the 3Shape is used for modifying this CAD file and correcting all the errors. If at all there are any mesh errors, it helps in correcting those errors. So that is what this 3Shape software does. So once that process is done, then you can go for 3D printing, or you can use for whatever application you're trying to do. So in fact, you can also do batch production. So the conventional process, I said, once you do that STL file generation, you have to do the build preparation. So build preparation is where you put the CAD file into a software, that is your 3D printing software, and help it to generate that supports. All these supports you don't have to generate manually. The software will automatically orient this part and generate the supports, and it will try to fit into the build platform. So once this is done, you can check the orientation and you can go for slicing. So if you're okay with this orientation, you can directly go for slicing. And what will that slicing do is, like I said, it will create this two-dimensional images, series of two-dimensional images. And you can set various print parameters, like such as the layer thickness, the layer height, the resolution of the slice, the material, the machine, and what is the wavelength of light that you are using for that particular machine. So all that print parameters, you call it as, can be set into this software, and the slicing can be done. And this sliced layer, like you can see, the entire layer is converted into a black and white form. So wherever you can see this white portion, right? So all this white portion is place where the UV light will pass through that screen and come on to that photopolymer. The black portion is where you don't have any light passing through, and those portion the resin is still going to be liquid form. So this is this image of layers, series of image of layers is projected layer by layer, and then the entire part is completed. And in fact, for this typical dental model, it has taken around 4.5 hours. And post processing also matters, because you have to post process to solidify and make the part better. To do that, you have to post cure it under a UV oven, and 50-watt UV oven is something that 50 to 60 watt. This oven power doesn't depend much. It just speeds the process of curing. So it takes 1 hour for post curing, and then you get a fine finished model. So you can see they have printed a series of aligners here. So in this, you can see there are almost 5 rows, 6 rows of dental aligners being printed, which can be stacked together. You can also stack them together by adding relevant support structure, and later you can remove them individually, and then you can clean and then do all your post processing work, because here it helps you in speeding this process. You can customize it the way that you want, because every patient will not have the same type of aligners. So each patient will have a different aligner. So you can do a series of batch production for your aligners and get it done in a very fast time. If you go for conventional way, it's a very long process. So this is where 3D printing has advanced the technique of generating dental analyzers, and it is widely adopted in this dental application. And this is a UV curing chamber where they place it into a chamber which has having UV lights around it, and they cure this part, and the cleaning happens in IPA. And another place where they are using this widely is for medical application of mass customization of hearing aids. Now, what happens here is, there are two types of hearing aids. One hearing aid which goes over the ear, where your electronic sits over the ear, and the actual device goes into your ears. But nowadays, people have come up with in-ear type hearing aid, which can be mass customized, because every patient's ear, be it right and left ear, will not have the same contours. So to do that, you can use 3D scanning and then obtain the contours, prepare your hearing aid according to individual patient's needs, and print them. And you can do mass customization, because you're not repeating it, the same model for everybody. Each patient, you're creating a different one. So you can print the entire batch of this. I think around there are 30 pairs in this, can be printed at a time. And as I said, since you're doing a series of batch production, the entire layer, cross-sectional layer, cures at the same time. So even if you're printing one set of pair, or if you're printing 30 pairs, the time taken is going to take the same. So it's going to take the 6 hours. So here for this, it takes 6 hours. Even if you're printing one single pair or these many pairs, it's still going to take 6 hours. And you'll be able to obtain more number of components in the shortest duration of time. So in this particular application, they have used biomedical resin. Why? Because you cannot use any resin, because specifically for medical application, that polymer has to be skin friendly. So it has to go through certain certifications. So to come up with that, they have also biomedical resin, which will help you in creating such parts. Next, coming to this RFID. So this is one such IoT related industrial application which has solved this. 3D printing has solved the creation of RFID antennas. So now you know how traditional RFID antennas work. So you have a small coil and you have a small chip in which gets activated when you have the radiation coming, the radiation or the pulse coming in contact with these coils. So you have different frequencies. Yeah, exactly. So different frequencies of radiations coming. So you have certain techniques of making these RFID antennas. So in traditional or the conventional way, people used to use electroplating technique, or I suppose there was one more technique which I'm not able to get it. What is it called? Electroplating and um, I forgot its name. Electroplating is one such commonly used technique where you create this RFID antenna. So you place this small substrate on which this etching process happens, your copper etching or the material etching process happens, and post that you do you obtain that antenna. The other method is called copper etching. Yes, exactly. So one method is copper etching, the other method is electroplating. So there are two types which are traditionally used, and these are conventional ways. And when you go for this conventional ways, it is very costly and time consuming process, and it generates a lot of chemical waste. In fact, there are some type of subtractive manufacturing, and due to the cost that is involved, the prototyping and production is very limited, and you need to have a large financial resource to do such antennas. And that is a major disadvantage when you go with copper etching process. And similarly, if you go with electroplating process, uh, that is using your oxidation and reduction process, where you create this antenna in a chemical bath. Again, where you place this particular substrate into a chemical bath, you apply voltage, and the part of that layer, the plating layer, comes and falls onto this place, and it creates that portion wherever you need. It happens there. And in both of these method, you have a lot of wastage, and the process also is very costly, and it is very time consuming also. So to overcome this challenge, we came up with one such method. So this is the copper etching that I was trying to explain. So you have a lot of disadvantage in this. So you have another technique. So I'll just skip this portion. You have another technique in 3D printing to create this RFID antennas. So it is called as nanoparticle silver ink technique, where you print this antennas. So if you see in this part, this antenna, the portion is being printed in a conductive layer. So this is made up of silver. So this it's called nanoparticle silver inks. So what happens is, uh, you, like I said, you see this polyjet or multi-jet printing. So it is similar to that technique, where you have nozzle heads that will drop the conductive parts layer by layer fashion in the desired form wherever you need this part to be present, that is this conductive part to be present. And then you have the curing happening, because you need to cure it, because it's going to be liquid polymer mixed with nano silver inks, uh, and due to that heating, that little bit of heating is done, so that it cures and helps it create this into a solid silver component. So it becomes this conductive component. In fact, you can combine two components. One is the non-conductive base form, and the other one is the conductive silver material. So both of this can be combined together and printed on the same machine, because you have multiple nozzle heads present in your multi-jet printing. So at different nozzle heads, different material will be extruded out of it. And then you go for post curing and post processing and obtain the actual part that you want to obtain. So this way it helps in prototyping this entire part very quickly. In fact, it from weeks of time to few days, it changed to a few days. So in very few days you can create the prototype, and in fact you can iterate it very fast, because if, say, suppose if this thing you didn't feel that it is efficient, you can immediately change your design and iterate it, and you'll be able to print it immediately and test it again immediately. So in that way you are not wasting any material, excess of material as such, like how the electroplating or the copper etching process does, because here you're using only the material that is required for you. You're not using any subtractive process, you're using more like additive process. That is where AM process, the additive manufacturing process, has enhanced in producing these IoT sensors and devices. In fact, there was one more project that I worked on, and I think even that is included in this. I'll show you that as well. And yes, like I said, the major advantage of these is you can prototype on the fly. You don't have to wait for weeks together to obtain your prototype, and also your wastage is quite less when compared to your copper etching and the other electroplating process. And the overall cost, if you itself, is very less when compared to your traditional method of printing. In fact, you can go with various material combinations together to get the entire part to be done in a single go. So, and in fact, these are multi-jet printing gives you a very high resolution parts. So there is very less post processing involved also, because your surface finish will be so excellent. You don't even need to do post processing, and it's easy for you to directly use it in your end application. That is where the major advantage comes. And another place where I want to show you is here. So there's one such project that I worked on. It's called Multiscope. So this doctor from Texas, one particular university who was our customer, had requested for a device uh, which uh, which would be easy to hold by uh, left-handed people as well as right-handed people, because now in the market, when we did the research, most of the octoscope and the endoscopes which are present were available for only right-handed people, and this was a major challenge. So you had to create a scope that suits both left-handed as well as right-handed people. So we went to the drawing room and found out, we came up with multiple iterations of design. Now the moment we go with iterations, what we need to do is we have to test it, because just with sketches and just with 2D or the 3D models and simulations, we cannot feel or we cannot see how the part is, and does it work well or does it feel comfortable. We'll not know it, right? So to understand that, we definitely have to go for prototyping. So the first thing that we opted is for going with stereolithographic prototyping. Here, what we did, we used SLA technique to get this part printed. And here, this thing is made up of two types of material. One is a tough material, which is industry grade tough material, which, because this portion is going to be held in your hand. So we made this portion in tough material, and this portion is where it is going to go into your nasal canal or ear canal. So this portion needs to be biocompatible as well as flexible. So because it has to pass through that passage, because what is the main functionality of this multiscope is, it will have a small camera and a small light at the tip of it at this location, which will help us to see that see the internals of our canals, be it nostrils or the ear canals. So this portion goes into our body, a certain portion of it goes into our body, and this particular part needs to be skin friendly. So we have to use only medical grade material here. So we printed this in two different materials. One is biocompatible material. The other one which we printed was in tough resin, which was suitable for our holding and withstand certain strength, because we had to hold it clearly, carefully, and yes, it should be comfortable also, right? Because you're trying to use that into a patient's body, so it needs to be comfortable. So we came up with such device, and we iterated almost 7 to 8 designs, and then we settled to one design which helped us in creating this specific part. And in fact, we made this IoT enabled as well, because this doctor used to stay in US, and we had to test it, and we have to know what is the parameters or if there is any issues popping up. And also this was camera is used to live stream this entire image or the video onto a phone. So all of our electronic device had to fit within this portion. And in fact, some of those electronic components, the casings and the passage also was also considered while printing, and it is very easy for us to iterate and go ahead with additive manufacturing technique. Because if you go with injection molding or any traditional method, it will be very difficult for you to prototype, because one is a cost factor that comes into picture, where you have to go with say if you go with injection molding, you have to make the initial die, and then the die also separately machining they will charge. So there's a lot of cost involved when you go for traditional or the conventional way. So this way we overcome the challenge by using AM process, and it was very easy for us to obtain this desired shape. And also there are certain buttons and holes which were present, which allows for the connectivity with the mobile phones. So there was a small antenna which was present here, which allows with the connectivity, easy connectivity. And that is what this multi-scope helped us in achieving. And yeah, so this is how we overcome this challenge. And in fact, we mass produce this only after we were sure that the device works without any issues, because it has to be approved by certain agencies to be used by the doctors. So that is one thing that we had to be very careful about. So this is one such application where we have physically developed an IoT based multi-scope, which also used to log all the data to the cloud server, and from that server we were able to access all the diagnostic related parameters and check if our scope is working right, and we knew how to iterate the next versions of these devices. So it was becoming very easy for us to go ahead with such production. And as I said, there are different polymers available with various characteristics, which is which can be used for various applications as well. So by this, I would like to conclude my session. And if you have any queries, you can please ask me, and we can have a small discussion on this as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session. Thank you for elaborating the 3D printing on the industrial aspects. Now it is up to the participants. If you have any queries, please. Participants, any clarifications?
Oh, Chandini.
Any questions from the audience?
Sir,
Okay, sir. Nobody is asking any questions. So let's wind up this session.
Was it boring? Like,
no, sir, it was very
interesting.
Because this first time even myself seeing the 3D printing on the industrial aspects. So much of we have seen with respect to academicians. So first time I'm witnessing the 3D printing with respect to an industry person. We have witnessed a very good session, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session. Let me invite Akash Pal Savio for the vote of thanks.
Well, thank you, sir. Your session was very much informative. So, on behalf of Andhra Vishwavadaya College of Engineering and Technology, I extend our sincere thanks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful session.